What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Go Talk with Marcus, powered by Podex, fueled by Goat Fuel. Once again, joining me on the show today, Payton Doyle, the Payton Doyle Show. What's up, man? How you doing?
What's good, man? Happy to be back here.
It's as always, it's nice to have you on the show. Just real quick, don't do it right now. Obviously, stay for this show. But when you're done with this show, go back and listen to the last time Pay was on the show, which was a couple days ago, when we talked about the Celtics and the Nets first round sweep. Really solid episode. Please check it out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff. Today we are talking about the Miami Heat getting the job done against the Atlanta Hawks in the first round. They get the job done in 5. They will face the winner of the 76ers Raptors series, which has the potential to be the first ever 3-0 blown lead in the history of the NBA. But that's another conversation for another day. Want to start real quick on the losing side of things with the Heat, or with the Hawks, excuse me. Trae Young has been definitely coming into his own as the face of that franchise. Really solid player, obviously. Struggled a lot this series. Was held under 15 points 3 times, held under 10 points twice. We looked at the ascension of Jason Tatum in the first round against the Nets. Trae Young definitely not ascending in this round against the Heat. But where does Trae Young rank in your mind as far as among some of the top point guards in the NBA today?
He's still a star player. Trae Young is still a tremendous player. It's hard to judge him off of one. Now, admittedly, one horrific series. I think he only averaged, like 16 and a half points.
Yeah.
He probably shot 35 from the field, like 20% from 3. I know in the closeout game, he had 11 points, went 2 for 12 from the field and 0 for 5 from 3, which is just, that's not something you want out of your star player in an elimination game for sure. As far as how he looks as the best under 25, Jason Tatum stepped up to the plate. Jason Tatum had his moment against Kevin Durant, one of the best in the world, and he hit a home run. Actually, He didn't even just hit a home run. He hit a grand slam.
Yeah.
He almost couldn't have been better. Averaged nearly 30 points per game and locked down Kevin Durant for most of the entire series. But Trae Young also did lead an underdog team to the Eastern Conference Finals last year as well. So while he had a bad playoff series this year, he had a great playoffs last year. So let's not try to, develop this narrative of that he can't perform in the playoffs, because he has.
Yeah.
He has. He just faced a tough defensive team in Miami. Best under 25 right now, I have Jason Tatum ahead of him, Luka ahead of him, and right now I have Ja ahead of him. But that's about it. That would put Trae Young at 4 as best under 25 in my opinion. He's a great shooter. He is very good at distributing the ball, but he's subpar at defense. And against a defensive team, they were able to lock him down and be physical.
I think Trae Young is a solid player. If anything, this series just proved, I think, what we already knew, which is that the Hawks are nowhere near ready to compete. Like last season was a really great run for them, but a lot of that had to do with they got a favorable matchup against the Knicks in the first round, and then Ben Simmons fell flat on his face in that semifinals in the second round. It's for me, it's hard pressed. I don't think you can name 5 point guards better than Trae Young today. I don't even think you can name 4 point guards better than Trae. Like you because you've got Luka, you've got Steph, and you have Chris Paul. I think those 3 guys are, and I think those are the 3 best point guards in the league. I don't know if there's another point guard right now, based on what we've seen, that's better than Trae Young at his best. This series is obviously not the best Trae Young, so this series isn't a good indicator of where he falls among the top point guards in the league. But I think Trae Young is anywhere from 4 to 7, depending on who you have ahead of him. He's definitely a top 10 point guard in the league for sure. As far as players under 25, that's kind of like the same thing. I think once you get past Jason Tatum, Ja Morant, and Luka, I don't know how many more players under 25 are better than Trae Young. And Devin Booker, but I think Devin Booker's like 26 now, so I don't even know if he still falls under the under.
I think he's older now.
Category. But those 3 guys, Jason Tatum, Luka Doncic, and Ja Morant, I think are better than Trae Young. It's hard depending on who you throw out there, I don't know if you can name another guy better than Trae Young as far as the young guys. It was a really bad performance. Like, to be held under 15 points 3 times and under 10 points twice, it's not a good look. Granted, this is one of the best defensive teams in the NBA, so like you kind of understand, but you still have to produce. DeAndre Hunter dropping 35 is nice, but that's not going to win you a basketball game against an elite talent like the Miami Heat. And in this series, when you look at Game 5, they didn't have the Heat didn't have Jimmy Butler, they didn't have Kyle Lowry. Like, that should have been Trae Young's game. That should have been the game that Trae Young, goes in and he wins that game for Atlanta, forces a Game 6 back at home. We know how great Trae Young is at home specifically. This was supposed to be a big game, and he fell short, understandably so, against a tough defense. But that is something you look at and you say, like, not that we already didn't know this, but this team clearly isn't ready. Trading away Cam Reddish earlier this season was very puzzling to me, especially for Kevin Knox, because Cam Reddish was another one of those guys last season that fit in perfectly around what they were trying to do in Atlanta. They've got a lot of things to fix. Clint Capella also not being there for a large chunk of the series played a massive part in it as well, because, as I said before this series really got started, Clint Capella's there. This series probably goes to 6 and 7 because you have a big man down low that can grab you boards. Like, the Hawks, if I'm not mistaken, were out rebounded just about every game of the series. They were held to 28 points or less in the paint 3 times. That, if Clint Capella's there, that's not the case. Like, they're going to score more than 28 points in the paint every single time. This is a team in Miami that's very scrappy, and they love to play down low. Like, that's what they do. So not having Clint Capella's presence definitely made an impact. But the Heat are the number 1 seed in the East for a reason. They're now moving on to the second round. We've seen now that the Bucks have also moved on, and so have the Celtics. Are the Heat the team to beat in the Eastern Conference at this point?
Right now, I would say no. I would say the Bucks, if they were healthy, would be rank above the Heat. And right now, though, the team to beat has to be the Boston Celtics. They are the hottest team since the All-Star break, and they've carried that energy on into the playoffs as well. So I'd say right now, Boston, because of their ability on the defensive side of the ball, much like Miami, and also Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown as well.
It's close. It's really, really close. I'm going to say they are not the team to beat as well, just off the simple fact that a lot of their offensive firepower, like, that Jimmy can give you, when he's healthy, Jimmy can give you 25 and 8 a night, right? You know that Kyle Lowry he's a shoo-in for about 20 and 8 a night as well. But a lot of their offensive firepower is coming off the bench. Guys like Strus, guys like Gary Vincent, guys obviously like Tyler Hero, who should be 6th man of the year this year. If not, I don't know what's going on with these awards, because there wasn't a better guy off the bench than Tyler Hero this season. Like, that's where a lot of their offensive firepower comes from. Not that Jimmy can't go out there and give you 30 or 45, because he gave us 35 earlier this series. With the Celtics, though, their firepower lies in their starting lineup, and then the role players play their roles. Like, a lot of times, sometimes you look at the Heat, and because Jimmy Butler he can score, but he's also a much better facilitator, in my opinion, than he is a scorer. Like, that's clearly the strength of his offense. Kyle Lowry, again, they have a lot of facilitators. A lot of their scores are coming off the bench. So I'm going to say the Celtics are also the best team. But the one reason why it's so close is because the talent gap's not that big, and the Heat have the better coach. Like, Eric Spoelstra, in my opinion, is the second best coach in the NBA today. I maybe third if you want to say that Ty Lue is ahead of him along with Monty Williams. I'll give you that. But in my opinion, Coach Spo is the second best coach in the NBA. He doesn't get a lot of credit. The Heat aren't a sexy team. Like, they don't really have that bona fide superstar talent. Like, there are people that think that Jimmy Butler is a superstar. There are other people that thinks he's not. And that's fine. But they have a lot of talent, and it works for them. And they're the number 1 seed for a reason. They won 53 games this season. Again, they were the only team in the Eastern Conference, and maybe the only team in the NBA, I think, or one of the only teams in the NBA to be ranked top 5 in offense and defense. Like, this is a solid basketball team. They have the depth. Bam Adebayo didn't have as much of an impact in this series as I thought he would, especially with Clint Capella not being there. I would hope that changes moving forward. I think Bam only averaged like 12 or 15 points or something like that this series, Which, I mean, when you've got Jimmy Butler doing what he was doing and you've got Victor Oladipo stepping up a little bit as well, it's not that big of a difference. But as they continue to go on, especially against the Celtics, you're going to need Bam Adebayo to step up and get those points productively, especially with Robert Williams being back. And like, I feel like they're going to clash at some point down the line. Like, that's the Eastern Conference Finals matchup, and it's going to be great. But yeah, I think the Celtics are better. But the Heat have the better coach, which is why that series would just be so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It would probably cause a lot of matchup issues for both sides. So as I mentioned earlier, right, 76ers had a 3-0 lead. They've now lost 2 straight. They play tonight in Toronto with no Matisse Thybulle, which means Toronto could potentially force a Game 7. It'd be the first time since I think 2003 or 2004 that a team has come back from down 3-0 to force a Game 7. Which of those two teams would cause more problems for the Heat? Would it be the Philadelphia 76ers, should they close it out tonight, or would it be the Raptors if they can pull off the upset and the first ever 3-0 comeback in the history of the NBA?
Which team would cause more problems to the Heat? I would say probably Toronto, because their style of basketball is more similar to like a Boston or a Miami, rather than like Philly. They have like Embiid does his thing.
Mm-hmm.
They want to have Harden do his thing, but Harden is not the same after that hamstring injury in Brooklyn, and now throughout ever since he's been traded to Philadelphia, he hasn't looked that great.
No.
And him and Embiid don't seem to be clicking whatsoever. So I would say right now the Raptors are playing better team basketball than Philly, and they're also healthier than Philly. Mm-hmm. If they were somehow able to complete the unpredictable, the unimaginable comeback down 3-0 in the first round against the Sixers, they would have so much momentum. Mm-hmm. They're healthier than Miami, because I'm expecting Fred VanVleet to be back by that Miami series if they were to win Game 7. So they'd be healthier than Miami, and on top of that, they have momentum. Momentum matters so much in playoff series, almost in all sports. Momentum is so important. Mm-hmm. Momentum is with Toronto right now. If they somehow win tonight and they somehow win Game 7, they're scarier to Miami than Philly would be, because Philly's not clicking. They have no chemistry, and they're also injured.
So this is the one drawback to trading for James Harden, because while obviously you now have a functional Ben Simmons because he's actually playing games, he hasn't really been producing. Like in 42 through 5 games, he's averaging 40 minutes a game. He's only averaging 18 points is James Harden. He's shooting 37% from the field, 38% from 3, 84% from the line. Like if you take away James Harden's 3-point attempts throughout the course of the season and this series, he's averaging like under 10 points a game, if I'm not mistaken, in this series. And he's averaging closer to what he's averaging right now. Like, this is not the James Harden that I think that Philly was getting. And it's not good. So now it becomes an issue of Tyrese Maxey's producing because he's averaging 21 points a game, and Joel Embiid's averaging 25 points a game. But he has an issue with his thumb. And as a big man, that's big, because big men have to rebound, have to block. Obviously, he can shoot and he can score. So, like, that's going to hinder Joel Embiid a little bit. He's going to play throughout. Now you're asking Tobias Harris to step up, and right now he's averaging 18 points a game. You're going to be looking now more from Danny Green and Shaq Milton and Matisse Thybulle if this series go. Like, Matisse Thybulle's not a scorer. He's their primary on-ball defender. And one of the reasons why they haven't been able to close out this series is because of Matisse Thybulle being unvaccinated, he hasn't played in the games in Toronto, which is why Toronto probably is going to win their game tonight, because Matisse Thybulle won't be there. So they can play a lot more loosely as far as not having to worry about the defensive pressure. Is Joel Embiid a good defender? Yes, down low. Is Tyrese Maxey a solid defender? Sure. Is Tobias Harris a solid defender? Sure. But none of those guys are the best defender on the team, and the Raptors know that. So I'm going to agree with you. I think the Raptors are also probably the going to cause more problems, because they have nothing to lose. And I always felt that teams that have nothing to lose, they just play basketball more freely, right? Like they're a lot more settled in and they're a lot more focused on getting the job done because all the pressure in this series, especially after you go up 3-0, is now on the Philadelphia 76ers. Like you made this trade, you traded away Ben Simmons to bring in James Harden. And now the expectation is, as one of the premier duos in the NBA, you're supposed to be contending for a championship this season. That's why you do that, so that your championship window can continue to stay open in a tougher Eastern Conference. And James Harden hasn't been producing at a James Harden level. Now, I did say last night when I was on Stuff About Sports that maybe it's because his role is different. And you can make that argument. His role is slightly different. He's not expected to drop 30 a night like he was in Houston. But that doesn't mean you can't drop 30 a night. Like when you look at a KD and a Kyrie at their best, both of those guys can give you 30 a night in the same game. And that's welcome. Just because the roles are slightly different doesn't mean it's not welcome. You look at what's happening in Golden State with the ascension of Jordan Poole. Like, yeah, Jordan Poole can give you 26, 27 a night, but that doesn't mean Steph Curry's not also going to drop his 26 and 27, and Klay Thompson's not going to do the same. Like, it's welcome. That's what you want, because ultimately, at its core, the goal is to score more points than the opposition. If the Philadelphia 76ers can hold on to this lead, which they should be, like, there's no reason why we should be in a game 6 right now. This series should have been over. But if they can get the job done on the road tonight and the 76ers move on to the Heat, I'm hard-pressed to think that the 76ers could win more than one game against Miami. Because if you have an injured Joel Embiid and you have a James Harden who's clearly lost a little bit of a step, like, all the Heat are going to do is force James Harden to beat you. And we see what that formula looks like in the playoffs. James Harden, in the biggest moments when the focus is on him, hasn't been able to succeed as the guy on a basketball team in the playoffs. So the Raptors, on the other hand, they're getting Fred VanVleet back. Pascal Siakam's not the sexiest player, but he is still an offensive threat. They do have the Rookie of the Year in Scotty Barnes, who is also a solid wing defender, and they have a lot of pieces around him. And we can't forget about Nick Nurse, who did coach this team to an NBA championship just a couple years ago. So I'm going to agree with you as well. I think it's definitely the Toronto Raptors, and I don't even think it's that close. I really don't think it's that close.
That and look at how ISO ball does against the Miami Heat.
Yeah.
They want you to ISO a player, and if Philly moves on, which, to be honest, I expect them to do so.
Yeah.
I don't think I have the boldness to predict a 3-0 comeback. I don't have that in me.
I don't either.
So I expect Philly to eventually win a game before 6 or 7. And but they're gonna need to ISO James Harden. Like Embiid is saying in these press conferences, I'm telling him to be more aggressive. They want the ball to be in Harden's hand. They want him to do the ISO ball, because Embiid, with that right thumb, he's very hindered. He's very hindered. That's affecting him a lot, and it's been evident the past 2 games of this series against Toronto. So, with that being said, how did ISO ball work for Trae Young? The Hawks are like, we need the Hawks are like, we need Trae Young. Trae Young's our star. He's averaging 28 a game in the regular season. We need him to do that in order to have a chance. And the Heat are like, bring it on, dude. And he got absolutely clamped. He looked miserable in the press conferences afterwards. Trae Young did. He looked like, oh my goodness, I don't know how this is happening, because the Heat are the best defensive team in the NBA. And especially against ISO ball and perimeter players.
100%. And this is a thing too that works out for the Heat's favor, because Victor Oladipo really stepped up last night in Game 5 to clinch this series. Now, with Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler coming back, like, if you're the Heat, you want this series to go an extra game, because if it goes an extra game, that means the series doesn't start for like another week or something like that. Like, you want that so that Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry can be at full strength. But even if they're not, even if Philly wins tonight and this series starts in a couple days instead of a full week or some change, Victor Oladipo has gotten better over the course of this series, as far as his production, as far as his efficiency, as far as being a reliable number one option on this team. Now what you have is you can bring Jimmy back in, similarly to what Golden State did when Steph came back. You can bring Jimmy back in on a minutes restriction and maybe have him come off the bench a little bit, or have him start, but keep him on staggered minutes, so that's not so much pressure on him. Because whether it's Philly or whether it's Toronto, the Heat are going to be the better team. They're going to have the better coach. They're going to have the better defense. They're going to have the better offense. Because both offense, like, Toronto doesn't have a prolific offense, and the only way that the 76ers offense can be prolific is if both James Harden and Joel Embiid are clicking, because their offense is heavily reliant on the pick and roll. The pick and roll doesn't work if one or both of those guys either A, aren't fully healthy, or B, aren't hitting their shots. James Harden's not hitting his shots, and Joel Embiid isn't 100% healthy. The pick and roll in Philly is just about it'll mean absolutely nothing. So give me the ISO ball. Like we saw the ISO ball fail in Boston. It's gonna fail in Miami because these two teams have such a similar mentality of we'll just send two, force you to out the bad pass. They play great zone defense, both of these teams. I love watching Miami play zone defense, whether it's 2-3 or whether it's 3-4, whether it's 4 out, 1 in, like whatever, however they want to do it, it works, and it works really, really well. They'll beat whoever it is, but Toronto would definitely cause more problems for them in the second round. Now, the Heat, they've got their time. They're going to have their time to rest. They'll be looking very closely, obviously, on what happens with Toronto and Philly tonight and then potentially in Game 7. The Hawks, on the other hand, their season is done. Obviously, after losing this series 4-1, you have Trae Young. Obviously, you have Clint Capella, who will come back healthy at some point. You have your Kevin Huerters and your Bogdan Bogdanoviches, who can get hot and whatever. But just like we talked about at the end of last episode with the Nets, what does the future look like for the Hawks as far as the next steps they can take to A, make it back to the playoffs, and then B, maybe even potentially make another run to the Eastern Conference Finals like they did last season?
They really, really desperately need to improve on the defensive side of the ball. They were gifted Trae Young, and Trae Young is a great player. However, he's not a great two-way player. He's not great defensively. The Hawks, despite being ranked second in offensive rating, they ranked 26th in defensive rating. They were bad at forcing turnovers. Teams, when facing Atlanta, they only turned the ball over on 11.5% of their possessions, which was third fewest by any team. And they also are terrible at defending the three-point shot. They allowed the 6th highest three-point percentage in the NBA in the regular season.
Yeah.
And then that's also, you see that when the Heat had 2 major injuries, and they were still able to have players come in and step up offensively. Victor Oladipo, he hadn't really played that much this season. He comes in and he drops like 25. So that being said, the Hawks are gifted offensively. They are a great three-point shooting team, a great offensive team, which is very valuable. However, their struggles on defense is the main thing that's holding them back from being a cream of the crop team in the Eastern Conference. Because you look at even Brooklyn too. Brooklyn has the same issue as well. Obviously, they're different because they have a lot of stuff off the court as well. But great offensively, bad defensively. The East is kind of made on defense. The top teams in the East are all great defensively. The Heat, great defensively. Celtics, great defensively. Then you look at Milwaukee is great defensively. You can't be a top team in the East without being physical, because that's what the East has become. They've become the physical conference in the NBA.
Some hindsight is 2020, and I don't think that they were ever really in the running. But I wonder if, looking back on it, if the Hawks would have, I mean, obviously not given what he's done, but like if at the time, if the Hawks at some point thought that Ben Simmons was attractive, because this has not ever been a good defensive team. And a lot of that has to do with trading away Cam Reddish. Like, Cam Reddish was their best wing defender. Obviously, Clint Capella being there, he's obviously their best defender overall, especially down low. But Cam Reddish was their best wing defender. They don't really have another guy that you can trust to put on the opposing team's best or second best player in an important situation in a game and slow them down, if not lock them down. I don't think Cam Reddish ever locked anybody down, but he's definitely slowing down a couple people in his career. That is major. So the free agency market, it's not really booming with wing defenders, because a lot of the premier and above average wing defenders are locked into wherever they are, because defense in an offensive in a game now that is so focused heavily on offense, defense is important. Like, defensive and players are now just that more important, because somebody's got to stop Golden State, somebody's got to stop Phoenix, somebody's got to stop Boston, somebody's got to stop Milwaukee. Like, somebody's got to stop Brooklyn. That's how you make your money playing defense. Obviously, you make your money playing offense as well. But we got to find somebody to stop these guys, and the Hawks don't have that. Trae Young, I think, as phenomenal as a talent as he is, Trae Young's not going to develop defensively in a way that's going to make a difference for the Hawks. He is just not. Like, we look at him as the next Steph Curry for a reason, because he's not. He ISO me on Trae Young. I don't care. That's not a threat. So I don't know how they're going to figure it out, whether it's by draft, whether it's by trade, but they're going to have to do something. All props go to Nate McMillan, because he has definitely turned this team around. This team isn't in the playoffs last year or this year if Nate McMillan's not the coach, I don't think. So they're definitely moving in the right direction. Again, it's unfortunate for the Hawks because last year they got there, but when you look at the circumstances, you kind of understand why they got there. They obviously don't get there if Ben Simmons is clicking. They don't make it out of the second round if Ben Simmons is being who Ben Simmons needs to be for Philadelphia. And also, they play the best team, the second best team in basketball, the best team in the conference. So you can't get mad at them for losing this series. I just do think, though, that this series shouldn't be over yet, because last night was the perfect time for Trae Young and the Hawks to steal another game on the road, force it back into Atlanta, and then we potentially get a game 7 out of it. That's not what happened. Trae Young's still great, or a great player to watch. At least they've got a couple ways to go, but I think they'll still be a playoff team next season. When you look at where they're at, they'll definitely still be a playoff team, probably hovering around that 6 to 10 range again, trying to fight into the play-in. But they've got ways to go.
And I like what you said there. Listen, Trae Young is still a great player. The Heat did what the Heat were expected to do.
Mm-hmm.
You're the 1 seed. You have to win in 5 or 6, at most 6. You know what I mean? You have to win in the first round at most 6 games.
Mm-hmm.
So the Heat handled their business. I don't think anyone truly expected the Hawks to win the series. It was surprising the way that Miami was able to contain Trae Young. That's what surprised me the most. Because when they did that in game 1, they held him to 8 points. I was like, okay, all right, good luck doing that again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then they really did. They really did. So that's what was surprising. But I don't want to put it all on Trae Young. Yes, it was a big loss, and it was just but Miami did what they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
Miami handled business. So I'd rather just give props to Miami for handling business. And Trae Young, he's young and he will bounce back.
Oh yeah, he'll bounce back. And listen, the one thing I will say, and I said this, I was talking about this earlier. Trae Young scored the most points in the NBA this season, which should be who wins the scoring title, not who averages the most points. But in my eyes, Trae Young was the scoring. He is still a lethal scorer. He is still very reliable. It is very easy to build around a guy like Trae Young. Like, just look at the model that they have with Steph Curry and Golden State. It's very easy to build around him. They just have to get it done. This is still a young team, so a lot of it relies on guys developing, like Kevin Huerter continuing to develop. DeAndre Hunter showed flashes last night, but can he do that consistently? He hasn't to this point in his career. If we can get a consistent, I'm not saying he's going to drop 35 a night, but if we can get consistent production from a guy like DeAndre Hunter in Atlanta, that makes a difference as well. Like, this is still a young team, a well-coached team. Obviously, like I said, Clint Capella's injury plays a factor here. They probably still would have lost the series without him, but it definitely wouldn't have looked as bad. There would have been a lot of things he could do differently. So they'll be fine. But they're continuing to get better though. Like, the record wasn't as good this season, but that's because the East got tougher this season. The Bulls came seemingly out of nowhere. I don't think anyone thought the Bulls would be this good. As far, granted, they lost, but the Bulls were really good in the regular season. The Heat are still the Heat, so it all depends on what happens next year. But they're definitely going in the right direction. Just like last time, can you please let everybody know where to find you and what's up next for you?
Yeah, you could find me on all social media at PD Sports. I post sports content on there. I have a weekly show, the Payton Doyle Show, every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. If you can't make the live show, I post it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for everyone to replay and listen to. If you like the audio version as well, that would be great for anyone who would like to go check that out. So yeah, and just make sure to show Marcus all the love in the world. Great, hardworking guy, and He's posting all this great content for you guys, and I'm happy that he invited me on again.
Yeah, I try I really do try my best. I really do try my best. We have a lot of things coming up. So again, like I said, please listen to the Celtics Nets episode either on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or you can watch it on YouTube from yesterday with Payton Doyle after you listen to this one. Then later on tonight, this is the first night of the draft. I will be on a show. I can't think of the name of it right now. I will be on a show tonight to talk about the Packers picking 22 and 28. Get my live reaction for that. Hopefully we don't. Hopefully we get it right. You can't have 2 first-round picks in this draft and not
Wide
get it
receiver,
right.
wide receiver.
Wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. Although maybe we draft a defensive guy, trade back into the second round and try to double dip on day 2. Who knows? But the point is wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver is how I'm thinking. That's what I'm going into it. Damn, a trade back. So there's that. Then there's other series that have wrapped up, as we alluded to. The Warriors got the job done against the Nuggets. So Spencer Fielding of Full Court Talk will be on the show, just like Payton, to talk about the Warriors, even though he's a Kings fan, but whatever. And we'll have a guy on to come on talk about the Bucks and the Bulls series as well. And then as the last 3 series wrap up with Philly and Toronto, Suns and Pelicans, and Mavericks and Jazz, do the same thing here again. And we'll continue to do that for the course of the regular season or playoffs. And then also the off-season series for the NFL is going to be coming back starting in 2 weeks. We're going to talk about all 32 teams in original draft order, regardless of trades. We'll go from 1 to 32 in that order. I'm really excited. We're going to have a lot of new faces on the show, a lot of new people to work with. So it's going to be really excited. All on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio. So please check all that stuff out. Follow me at the links below: Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all GTP Marcus. You're going to find me. If you can't find me, you're just not trying hard enough, because I'm literally everywhere except for Facebook. You're going to find the show. So for Payton Doyle, the Payton Doyle Show, this is Marcus with Go Talk with Marcus signing off. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, you guys enjoy the rest of your lives.